Such a big and important topic, so let's keep the discussion going. Bill Kirkner, Aquatics Director at the Jewish Community Center in Owings Mills. You just saw him in that story, but you were kind enough to come in. Good morning.
Glad to be here.
This is a really scary subject, and we were just talking about how quickly things can change.
Right. The thing that most parents don't realize is just how fast something can happen with their child. It's as simple as, a 4-year-old is reaching for their toy in deep water, and they just go headfirst into the water, and you may not even have all that splashing and all that noise. It can be that fast. And even if a person gets to that point where they're in serious trouble, there's about 20 seconds that a lifeguard or a parent has to recognize that there's a problem before the person goes underwater.
Well, let's get right to the tips that you provided.
Sure.
You said there are 4 things really to keep in mind, and you said the first, distress swimmers.
Okay, so what we were talking about in the piece before is that a normal swimmer, when they're swimming, makes horizontal motion across the water. As somebody begins to get distressed, so if they have a cramp in their leg, or if something's happened to them, if they just to start get tired, they get a position that's hanging down in the water. Right? When they actually are at the point where they can't move anymore, they go straight up and down in the water, and that's the point where it's really dangerous, and you only have a couple of seconds before that person is going underwater and is actually going to start sucking water into their lungs.
Okay, active drowning victims.
Right, that's that point that we were talking about where they're straight up and down in the water. At that point, the person's mind is pretty much just shut off. Their head goes way back, their arms go out to the side, they can't even kick anymore.
Is it panic mode, exhaustion?
We used to call it panic, but it's actually this thing that we call the active drowning response. And at that point, they're not even thinking. That person can't yell, the water's coming over their mouth at that point. And so whereas a lot of people expect that there's going to be splashing and the person's going to yell, and if mom's taking a call or dad's reading a book or a magazine, they expect if their child gets in trouble there's going to be all this noise. There won't be. At that point, they're just got 4 more seconds of breath before they're under and done.
Okay, so drowning signs, what do we look for?
Well, I think the big thing to look for is to keep an eye on your child and be sure that they're safe. I think the key thing is to make sure that they're keeping their head above the water. I think the other big thing, this case that we talked about just a little bit ago where the child was underwater, if you see a child that's underwater for more than a couple of seconds and it doesn't look right, reach in and scoop them out.
Right.
I mean, if you're in shallow water, better to be careful than to be sorry and find out later that the child was really in trouble. If you think it's trouble, it's trouble.
And it's one of those things where, like you said, time is so important. Don't worry about your cell phone in your pocket. Jump in there and go after your kid.
And if you knew how many cell phones I've destroyed going in after people at the pools, you have no idea.
Right.
So that's exactly right. And don't be afraid of being embarrassed. Right? So you grab a child, pick them up because you think that they might be in trouble. So it turns out that they were just holding their breath underwater. Would you rather find out that you just interrupted a kid who was holding their breath underwater,
sure,
or that you knew and could have helped somebody who was in trouble and didn't?
Okay, well, let's go over the tips really quickly that you provided.
Okay, so some basic tips to keep in mind. Number 1, parents need to watch their kids at the pool. All right, that's more important than anything else, particularly if you have a child who's under the age of 7. You need to keep an eye on your child at all times. Even if you think they can swim, children that age don't know when they're too tired or when they're too cold and don't know when to stop. So you've got to keep an active eye on your child. If you have to leave and go to the bathroom or something like that, swap off with a friend.
Okay.
Right? You can run to the concession stand while the other person is watching the child. Number 2, get swim lessons. The best, most important thing that you can do for both your child and yourself is to get swim lessons. And if you don't know how to swim as an adult, you should go learn how to swim too. Families that swim together tend to be better at protecting themselves against this sort of problem.
Right.
Number 3, remember that the lifeguards aren't babysitters.
Right.
Lifeguards are there to help somebody in the event of an emergency and to help enforce the rules. But they've got to watch out for 50 to 100 other people in the water at the time. You can't rely on them to be watching your child all the time. That's your job as a parent.
Okay. All right. Well, Bill Kirkner, he's the Aquatics Director at the JCC in Owings Mills. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks very much
for
having us here. Great.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for coming in. Cherie, good stuff, right?
All right.